Hello there people. In this video, I'm going to teach you how to add an HDRI in Blender. We'll be using this simple bedroom scene that I created some time back for this tutorial. It's a simple scene as you can see. It's already textured. However, I've not set up the lighting for this scene. So stick and stay with me as we learn how to add an HDRI in Blender. So before we add an HDRI to our scene, we are going to need an HDR file to light up our scene. So I have a specific folder on my desktop where I keep all my HDRIs, and I assume you also have same. But I just want to show you a website where you can get lots and lots of HDRIs so that you can always use them in Blender. So the website is Polyhaven. Some of you might know this. Those of you who don't know, now you know. So Polyhaven is a great website where you can find HDRIs, textures, and 3D models all for free. It's 100% free. So let's browse the HDRIs to select an HDRI for our tutorial. So the categories of HDRIs are over here. You can look through and choose an appropriate one for your scene. So for our scene, I'm going to choose an outdoor HDRI. We are going to browse through and choose an appropriate one. So I'm going to go for this particular HDRI. So when choosing an HDRI, you can choose the file format. There are two file formats here. We have an HDR and EXR file format. Both of them work amazingly well in Blender. So the resolution is set to 4K. But when you hit the drop down, you can see the various resolutions available for this HDRI. If you are using a low-end PC, I recommend you choose a lower resolution in order to avoid any issues in Blender later on. But then if your machine can handle a high resolution, then you can go for a high resolution. So I'm going to choose 4K resolution, and then I'm going to hit download for our scene. So let's quickly look at our scene in the render mode before we add our HDRI. So as you can see, our scene is being lit up by the default world settings. If we head over to the world properties tab, you can see that the color is set to gray, which is what is lighting our scene currently with the strength of 1. So the strength controls how bright the scene is. So I'm going to enter into the camera view so that we can see the effects of the HDRI on our render. I've already set up a composition, as you can see. So the world properties tab contains properties that can be tweaked to influence the environment's lighting. So like I said, our scene is being lit up by the default gray color. If I'm to change it to green, you realize that the world lighting for the scene would be set to green. So this is what is lighting the environment for our scene. So we are going to change the environment lighting from just the basic color and then use an HDRI image. So to do that, we are just going to click on this icon over here, this yellow icon over here, and then we would have a pop-up. So we are going to use an environment texture. So we are going to navigate to the texture section and then choose environment texture. So this is what is going to allow us to add the HDRI. So we select environment texture, and then you have these settings to change. So now our scene is pink because that is Blender's way of informing you that you have not added an environment texture. So we are going to add our HDRI as an environment texture. So to do that, all we have to do is select open and then navigate to where you have your HDRI saved. So the HDRI I downloaded, I saved mine to the desktop. So this is the HDRI. We are going to add it to our scene. So we are going to select open image, and then you should have your HDRI added to your Blender scene. And just look at what we have over here. I mean, it's way cooler than the default world settings, and our scene looks more photorealistic now. So that is how to add an HDRI using the world properties tab. So we can increase or decrease the strength to adjust the brightness of our image. So the default strength is 1, but maybe if I increase it to 3, it becomes more brighter, as you can see. And then you can proceed to render your image. But I think the default settings of 1 is okay. Maybe I might set it to 2. And ladies and gentlemen, that is how you add your HDRI in Blender. Let's look at the second way of doing this. Okay, so now that we know how to use our World Properties tab to add an HDRI, we are going to look at how to add an HDRI using the second method, which is the shader editor. So we can head over to the shading workspace, which has the shader editor, or we can just change our 3D viewport into the shader editor and then add our HDRI. So I'm going to split my viewport into two, and then I'm going to convert this viewport into a shader editor. Like I said, you can always head over to the shading workspace because you have the shader editor here, which you can use to add the HDRI. I'm just going to do it in the layout workspace. I'll split my viewport into two. I'm going to use this viewport to enter the camera view. So I'm going to hit numpad 0 and then go to my rendered mode so that I can see the effects of the environment lighting on our scene. So we change this viewport to the shader editor. So to add an HDRI using the shader editor, you just have to switch from object to world. So this gives you a node setup that you can use to control the world lighting. So one thing you must bear in mind is that this node setup actually corresponds to the world properties panel. They are basically the same thing. It's just that they are represented in different ways. So if you're in the shader editor, you can make tweaks to the world settings just by switching from object to world. If you don't want to come to the shader editor, you can also head over to the world properties panel and then make your tweaks over here. So if I'm to change the color from gray to blue, our world lighting is changed to blue. And then over in our shader editor too, we realize that the color has also changed to blue. We didn't make the change over here, we made a change over here. If I make the change over here in the shader editor, you would realize that, let me change it to yellow, you realize that over in the world properties tab, the change has been effected. So they are actually the same thing. It's just that you can make the changes from here or from here. So let's add our HDRI. So in the same way that we added the environment texture in the world properties panel, that is the same way we are going to add an environment texture in the shader editor. Just that this time around, we are just going to use nodes. So to add our environment texture in our shader editor, we can just use add and then come to texture and then select environment texture. And then we have this node over here. So you click to release and then you connect the environment texture node to the background node. Again, you realize that the image has turned pink because we've not added any image. So Blender is prompting us that we've not added any image by turning all pink. So to add the HDRI, you just select open, navigate to where your HDRI is saved. In this case, it's on my desktop. So I select the HDRI and then open image, and then I have my HDRI. So you can either use the shader editor or use the world properties, and you realize that whatever change we did over here has reflected over here. So just as we modify the strength in the world properties tab, we can easily do the same thing in the shader editor. So I'm going to set the strength to maybe 1.5, or maybe let me go for 3 to brighten up the image. So that's how to add an HDRI using the shader editor.